everyone, my name is Holly and welcome to my beginner's guide to fantasy. We all know fantasy is one of the most popular genres and it can be intimidating if you're not used to reading it. It's so easy to pick up a fantasy that might be too advanced and be turned off by it. Or maybe you love fantasy, which we should be best friends, but you have some friends and family who want to get into the genre and you just don't know what to recommend them. Well, regardless, look no further as I have just the list for you. Before we begin, be sure to subscribe to my channel if you end up liking what you see. I upload videos every single week, and remember to drop a comment down below about what fantasies you think make a great starter kit. I truly think I have a great stack of fantasy here for you that will change your mind about the genre, or even reading in general if you're not an avid reader. So fantasy veterans, you might have already read these books before, but hey, we were all noobs once, and I truly would have really appreciated this list at the beginning of my love for reading. So let's get right into it. It's always great to have an excuse to talk about the book that literally changed my life and was the baby steps into the more darker and technical side of fantasy. Half a King by Joe Abercrombie. The book that led me to obsessing over Joe Abercrombie, I mean you can tell by the books behind me, and reading every single book he has published and owning multiple editions. The love is strong. So I think this is a fantastic gateway into Joe Abercrombie's work in general, and possibly diving into what he is mostly known for, and that is the First Law universe. This is the first book in the Shattered Sea trilogy, completely set apart from his other works. Now, this is labeled as YA, but it did not read YA to me at all. I think it's labeled that mostly because of the classic adventure setting it has, and because Yarvi, the main character, is a child. It is slightly dark and violent with some profanity, but it's nothing to take away your innocence. Yarvi, who is the prince of our story, was born with a crippled hand, and he lives in this very Viking-like society, so he is very underestimated. His family is betrayed, and he is left sitting on the throne unexpectedly. It was so refreshing to see a character like Yarvi thrusted into this world he was totally unprepared for and then fight his way through it. As with a lot of books I'm talking about today, this series follows a group of characters and the camaraderie between all of them is so freaking fun. This is a book that eased me into adult fantasy in January 2018. Oh yes, I have that date embedded in my brain, and I think it'll do the same for you. Now, going in a very different direction, I want to give my new fantasy readers a challenge. Not difficulty wise, because that's not the point of this video. I'm talking about length, and that is Soulkeeper by David Daglish. I think this is one of the most underrated fantasy series ever. Though it looks scary, thickness wise, it's so easy to read and you'll fly through it. The first 100 pages is by far one of the best reading experiences I have ever had. The setup is incredible and so intense, great characters and character development, and you don't even have to deal with all the political bullcrap because it's set in this world with a variety of creatures who have awoken and are conflicting with humans. Our main character is a priest, and at the very beginning he is tasked to travel to this village that has been plagued. He gets there, things are not what they seem at all, and monsters have begun to spawn. It does take gore to the next level, I will admit, so please be aware of that, but you know what balances it all out? A freaking cute talking flame called Puffy, who travels with our main character. That's definitely where the lightness comes in, and there's far more humor surrounding these moments, including a sassy fairy. Listen, I know fantasy can get stale for some people because you constantly see the same things over and over again, but the main character amasses a fond family of humans and otherworldly creatures that work together to deal with the darker elements that are on the rise, and it makes it interesting, but most importantly, beginner friendly. The next masterpiece of a beginner fantasy I'd recommend, and if you've been following me for a while, you probably saw this coming, Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Eames. Another all-time fave of mine. I mean, if you are a fantasy lover already, you should have read this by now. I mean, it's the epitome of fantasy. It has all the good tropes and mechanics you love to see. Even though it's following a group of main characters, it's incredibly fun without being overwhelming. We have a pack of mercenaries who are brothers in arms. They are retired now, they're much older, drunk, fat, lazy, but they have to band together once again and go on one final mission together. It's been over 20 years since they had slain anything but ham for breakfast, so you can imagine the humor as they buckle on their old gear and set off to save the day. It's a quick and easy read, it'll make you laugh, it's very exciting and full of action and thrills. The pages literally flip themselves. It's seriously a book you'll be tempted to devour all at once. There are 2 books out in this series. The second one is just as good. The third one is hopefully coming out next year, fingers crossed. They are all standalones, but I don't recommend like reading book 2 first and then book 1. But they do end satisfyingly with a complete story. So next we are going into the opposite direction, and I'm actually going to mention a YA fantasy, which I don't mention very much on this channel, but sometimes there are some really good ones, and that one is Daughter of the Burning City by Amanda Foody. Amanda Foody is one of my favorite YA authors. I have yet to be disappointed by her books. She writes YA fantasy, even though I believe she is writing a middle grade right now, which is going to be really fun. But I just find her books so easy to get into, and the worlds that she creates are always so interesting and moody. So, Daughter of the Burning City. I loved this book. It's a dark, circusy, kind of murder mystery fantasy. It's all about a festival-like city, and within it lives our main character Serena, who can create illusions. This also means she can create people, basically like her whole family in the book, who can think and act for themselves. Suddenly one of them is murdered, which shouldn't even be possible since they're technically not real, and this raises suspicions for Serena, and she realizes her whole family could be in danger. How unique is that summary? Just talking about it makes me want to reread it. This story really reminded me of the video game / manga Danganronpa, just bodies dropping left and right and the killer is someone amongst the chaos. Also, if you're a foodie, like Amanda Foody, get it? Carnival food is mentioned a lot, like kettle corn and candied cherries, sugar-coated pecans. Illustrations are even peppered throughout the book to keep you interested. It's great. The next beginner fantasy I highly recommend checking out is Spellslinger by Sebastian de Castell. This is yet another book that is labeled as YA, but it's published by Orbit Books, and the senior publicist herself said they only publish adults, so I guess take that as you will. This is a series that I feel like has already brought in a lot of new fantasy fans. The pacing of the first book is just perfect. It doesn't feel grindy like some fantasy stories can manifest at times. It's very quick and to the point and just plain fun. You're following a young boy named Kellen who has always dreamed of being a powerful mage. Me too. But his dreams are shattered when his magic doesn't show at the age it's expected to. This leads to a ton of shenanigans and an adventure where you meet 2 of the best characters in the whole series, Righteous and Animal Companion, who reminds me so much of Daxter from the video game Jak and Daxter. Personality, and also he kind of looked like Daxter in my head, so if you're a fan of that video game series, highly recommend. And also we have Farius, who is this kind of western gunslinger lady. Castell created a main character I feel like most people can relate to. I do feel like Kellen gets a little annoying at times, but it's almost understandable with the crap he has to go through. In fact, this entire 6-book series are all fairly short. I binge read them within a month. They are so easy to just read one after the other. Castell's writing is so full of humor and excitement, and I found it really hard to put the book down once I started, which is why I binge read all of them. I actually have a video all about if this entire series is worth reading. I'll link that down below for you if you want to check it out. The magic system is really well done and easy to understand, which makes it another great beginner fantasy. So we're talking about fantasy today, and it almost feels wrong not to include an easygoing dragon fantasy, Blood of an Exile by Brian Naslund, a book I recently read, and it actually inspired this video. If you enjoy friendship, loyalty, betrayal with a world with interesting detailed dragons, I highly recommend checking this one out. It has all of the great elements of fantasy without anything complicated, even following multiple perspectives, like 5 here, if I remember correctly, which I know can deter people because, I mean, it can get complex. It's super easy here and done really well. Each character is so different and have distinctive personalities. This is just such a timeless story following Silas, who's an ex-lord, now banished from the land, and his punishment is to kill dragons. In the beginning, he is hired by the king for his skill, because I mean he's really good at killing dragons, to go on a very dangerous quest with some friends along the way. Definitely add this one to your fantasy starter kit. So this is the final book I'm going to be talking about today. I know you're sad because this list has been absolutely epic. But the final beginner fantasy I recommend to you is The Bards Blade by Brian D. Anderson. This is a great magical start to a new series, a character-driven story with very simple but good writing. The book is pretty addicting. The beginning focuses on setting up the mood, and then it becomes kind of like a contemporary story in a fantasy setting. It's following 2 perspectives who are a couple, one of them being a bard, which, I mean, already makes the story's fun level heightened by itself. They live a peaceful life in this village that's protected from the terrible outside world by a magical barrier. I think this is a great beginner fantasy because there aren't huge battles or epic displays of power. The story wasn't particularly fast-paced or like action-packed or even heavy on magic either. The writing isn't fancy and the storytelling was pretty simple and linear, and there's just something about that makes the book genuine and such a breeze. But I highly recommend. It's not a long book, and the second one just recently released. So that's going to be it for all of my beginner friendly fantasy. If you're looking to get into some light and sometimes dark fantasy with great characters, great dialogue, and books that are just long enough too, these are definitely books that don't overstay their welcome. Even Soulkeeper, though it's long, it doesn't feel that way. If you learned anything from this video, please click the thumbs up button and leave a comment below about other beginner fantasies. Follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram at HollyHeartsBooks and on Twitter at HollyNiece. And until we meet again, happy reading.